As Sarah hurried down the hospital hallway, her wallet slipped from her apron, spilling cards and a folded sonogram onto the floor. Before she could react, Ethan Caldwell bent down and picked up the printout. His eyes scanned the image, then snapped to Sarah, confusion and shock flickering across his face. "Is this yours?" he asked quietly, his voice tense. Sarah's breath caught. She tried to take the sonogram back, but Ethan held on, searching her eyes for the truth. "Sarah, are you? Is it mine?" The hallway seemed to freeze around them. Sarah clenched her fists, voice barely above a whisper. "Please, not here." But Ethan didn't let go. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shook her head, pain flashing in her eyes. "I can't do this now, Ethan." As she finally pulled the sonogram from his hand and walked away, Ethan stood rooted in place, left with more questions than answers. What would you do if your secret was suddenly exposed? Let us know below, and don't miss what happens next in Sarah's story. Sarah had learned to keep her head down in the diner's fluorescent hum, where tired men nursed their third mug of coffee and the cook cursed softly over the sputtering grill. The city never really slept. It just changed its face after midnight. That night, Sarah's uniform felt tighter across her ribs. The name tag, scuffed from years of wiping tables, dug into her chest each time she reached for another stack of chipped plates. It wasn't supposed to matter. Just another late-night shift. Just a few more tips toward the mounting stack of bills on her kitchen counter. She kept counting, the hours left on her shift, the loose change in her pocket, the breaths between each order. After closing, she'd let her coworker talk her into a drink at the bar down the block. "You need it, girl," the woman had said, a kind of kindness in her eyes that Sarah was too tired to refuse. The bar was sticky with old spilled whiskey and the laughter of strangers. She remembered the way her sneakers stuck to the floor and how the music pulsed through the walls. The rest blurred. A man with green eyes and a voice like summer rain, the bitter taste of bourbon, a joke she barely understood, laughter that wasn't quite hers. A month later, a plastic stick trembled in her shaking hands, its tiny window spelling out a word she didn't dare say aloud. In the bar's cramped bathroom, she pressed her back to the door, the hum of neon bleeding through the peeling paint. The door shook as someone banged, impatient. "Hurry up!" Sarah stared at the pink line, everything in her falling silent. Outside, someone was singing off-key to a jukebox tune she didn't recognize. That night, she waited 40 minutes for the last bus. The driver didn't look up as she climbed aboard, sliding a wrinkled dollar into the slot. The seats were sticky. She pressed her forehead to the window, watching raindrops snake down the glass and blur the city lights. At the next stop, a woman in scrubs climbed aboard, clutching her phone to her chest, eyes hollow from too many night shifts. Sarah wondered if she knew this exhaustion, this weight in the pit of her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. By the time Sarah stumbled up the cracked concrete steps to her apartment, the city was alive with sirens. She fumbled for her keys. The lock stuck, as always. Upstairs, her neighbor was yelling at the TV again. The carpet in the hallway smelled of old beer. Inside, her apartment was dark, except for the kitchen nightlight, a battered lamp shaped like a cat, its plastic whiskers missing. She dropped her purse onto the counter and opened the fridge. There was half a bottle of orange juice, 2 eggs, a takeout container she didn't trust. She closed the door and leaned back, letting the cool air hit her face. She slid the pregnancy test onto the table. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She could still taste the bar's stale air, hear the man's voice. No name, no number, just the memory of his hand tracing lazy circles on her back. Just one mistake and my whole life changed. The words pulsed in her head. She almost laughed, but it stuck in her throat. She curled up on the old couch, knees drawn tight. Through the window, blue and red lights splashed across the peeling wallpaper. Sirens wailed down Main Street. Somewhere a dog barked. Sarah counted the seconds between each howl, the way she'd counted everything since she was 16 and her mother left for good. In the morning, she woke to the sound of rain against the glass. She brushed her teeth in the kitchen sink, pulling on the same faded uniform. The test sat on the table, as if waiting for her. She slid it into a plastic bag and tucked it deep inside her purse. At the diner, the usual faces were already hunched over their coffee. Her manager, Frank, barked at her to move faster. A plate slipped from her hand and shattered. No one noticed. She worked through muscle memory, scribbling orders, refilling mugs, smiling when she remembered to. During her break, she sat in the alley behind the diner, knees pulled to her chest. She dialed the number scrawled on the matchbook from that night. Disconnected. She tried again. Nothing. It rang in her ear, a hollow sound. A rat scurried past her shoe. Sarah stared at the brick wall, chipped and scribbled with graffiti. She could feel the change inside her, a secret, heavy and terrifying. The air tasted like grease and old cigarettes. Back inside, a customer waved her down, impatient. She pasted on a smile, but her mind was drifting. Her debts, the rent, the price of baby formula, the question of how to do any of this alone. By the end of the shift, her feet ached and her eyes burned. On the bus ride home, she gripped the pole so tight her knuckles turned white. A little girl with braids watched her, wide-eyed, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Sarah smiled, quick and fleeting. The child's mother looked away. She reached her apartment just before midnight, the hall silent except for the soft tick of her neighbor's clock through the wall. She set the test on the table again, stared at it for a long time. Through the blinds, the city blinked and flashed, never sleeping. Sarah sat alone, hands shaking, staring at the word that would change everything. Outside, sirens flashed past, loud, relentless, as if warning her that nothing would ever be the same. What would you do if your whole life changed in a single night? Comment below and stay tuned for the next chapter of Sarah's journey. The alarm blared at 6 a.m., slicing through Sarah's sleep like a warning. She blinked in the gray half-light, hands pressed against her belly, willing away the nausea. She counted backward, 4 hours of sleep, 1 more bill due, 3 more days until her next paycheck. She moved quietly so her neighbor wouldn't hear, brushing her teeth with tap water, pulling on the uniform that never really fit. In the bathroom, the mirror showed a girl with dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed thin. The pregnancy test was hidden behind a box of aspirin. She'd almost convinced herself the pink line meant nothing, that she could still turn back. But the waves of sickness, the way her body felt strange and new, insisted otherwise. Downstairs, the world buzzed. Traffic, honking horns, the rumble of delivery trucks. Sarah clung to her coffee like a lifeline. She'd learned to sip it slow, counting each bitter mouthful, fighting the urge to run. "You look pale," Frank grunted, not looking up from the register. "Got a bug or something?" She shook her head, forced a small laugh. "Just tired." The lie tasted like burnt toast. She worked double that day, her manager claiming someone called out sick. Her stomach twisted, not just from nausea, but from the pressure of moving too fast, from the looks her coworkers gave her. 2 servers whispered at the counter, glancing up with raised eyebrows. She could almost hear them. Sarah's putting on weight. She's been acting weird. Bet she's got a secret. She kept her head down, stacked plates, refilled sugar canisters, wiped tables with shaking hands. When the lunch rush ended, she escaped to the storeroom, breathing in the cold scent of pickles and bleach. She closed her eyes, counted to 10. Her phone buzzed. A reminder for her prenatal appointment next week. A calendar she'd set up in the hope she'd feel ready. Not yet. Not today. By 3, Frank cornered her by the dish sink, his voice sharp. "You're not pulling your weight, Sarah. I need you to stay for the dinner shift, got it?" She swallowed hard. I have plans." He shrugged, walking off. "You need the hours, right?" Her hands curled tight around a coffee cup, knuckles white. She washed dishes, her fingers numb from hot water. In the reflection of the steel faucet, she saw her own eyes, wide and scared. The gossip at the counter grew louder. She imagined them telling the new girl, "Sarah's got a past. Sarah's trouble." As dusk fell, she changed into her only clean shirt, pulling her jacket tight against the city's chill. The bus came late, headlights cutting through puddles. She sat near the back, her head pressed against the window, watching as the city's lights flickered to life. She counted the neon signs: pawn shop, laundromat, pharmacy, each one a stop on her endless loop. When she arrived at the hospital for her side job, the world felt slower, colder. The badge around her neck felt like a weight, the faded letters spelling out her name for all to see. She clocked in, fingers trembling. There was a memo taped to the time clock. All staff must attend tomorrow's meeting. New CEO arriving. In the staff room, someone laughed about it. "Bet he's never worked a day in his life." Another snorted. "He'll fire half of us, just watch." Sarah busied herself, organizing supply shelves, counting gauze packets, avoiding the chatter. Her stomach churned. Late that night, the hospital's glass doors hissed open. He walked in, the man from the bar. Same eyes, same air of confidence, but now in a tailored suit, ID badge gleaming. Ethan Caldwell, CEO. Sarah's heart thudded. She backed into the shadows, willing herself invisible. But it was too late. His gaze swept the room, stopping on her. His eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across his face. He stepped closer, slow, controlled. "You work here?" His voice was quieter than she remembered, but still carried the weight of authority. The room fell silent. Her co-workers looked from him to her, uncertain. Sarah's hands fumbled with a stack of forms, her throat tight. "Yeah. Just started a few months ago." Her voice barely carried. Ethan's eyes didn't leave her face. The room seemed to shrink, air thick with questions. She could feel the tension building. Hers, his, the staff's, everyone guessing at the connection. Frank appeared, eyes wide. "Sarah, you know Mr. Caldwell?" She shook her head, lips pressed tight, but Ethan was still watching, searching her face for something she couldn't give. For a moment, the noise and fluorescent lights faded, replaced by memory. The night at the bar, his hand in hers. Laughter in the dark. The silence broke as someone dropped a tray. Frank barked an order, snapping everyone back. Sarah ducked her head, pushing past, desperate for air. She made it to the hallway before her knees nearly buckled. She pressed her hand to her stomach, the world spinning. Back in the staff room, Ethan watched her go, face unreadable. Their eyes had met, and now everything she'd tried to hide was a hair's breadth from being exposed. If you were in Sarah's shoes, would you run or stand your ground? Let us know in the comments, and don't miss the next part of her journey. Sarah drifted through her next shifts on autopilot, careful to avoid the main corridors and, especially, the CEO's gaze. Every time she punched her card, the beep seemed louder, a warning. Her new schedule was posted, a string of awkward hours that forced her to cross paths with Ethan Caldwell far more often than before. The hospital hummed with routine, nurses chatting by the water cooler, janitors whistling as they polished the linoleum, the scent of reheated soup in the break room. But under that surface, the currents had changed. Each time Sarah entered the cafeteria, she felt eyes follow her. She'd catch glimpses of Ethan in meetings, his presence a shadow at the edge of her days. Sometimes she'd find him standing near the elevators, talking in a low voice with board members. Other times, he was alone, peering out the tall windows as if searching for something lost in the city lights. Sarah kept her distance, shrinking into her uniform, moving like a ghost between rounds. Still, Ethan's attention seemed to find her in small, unsettling ways. A shift swap she didn't request. A longer lunch break handed to her by the floor supervisor with a strange smile. The rumors started. Sarah was getting special treatment. Sarah had a connection. Each word burrowed under her skin. One morning, Sarah lingered in the staff lounge, her stomach twisting. She thumbed the edges of her sonogram printout, the black and white image a secret heartbeat. She'd folded it into her wallet, carried it everywhere, a private reminder of what was at stake. She watched the coffee drip, slow and relentless, into a stained pot. Two orderlies argued over break times at the next table, voices rising, falling, just background noise. Her phone vibrated, a reminder for her next appointment. She checked her balance. Not enough. Not yet. She tucked the sonogram deeper, gripping her badge, reminding herself to keep going. That afternoon, the hospital was busier than usual. A code rang out overhead. Sarah rushed down the hall with a tray of supplies, weaving between gurneys and clusters of nurses. She could feel Ethan watching from the nurse's station, his gaze steady, unreadable. She didn't meet his eyes. A patient called her over for help. She knelt to adjust a blanket, murmuring soft reassurances, her hands steady even as her heart thudded against her ribs. As she rose, her wallet slipped from her apron, tumbling to the linoleum. She bent to grab it, but the contents scattered. Loose change, ID cards, and the sonogram printout sliding across the floor. A hush fell over the hallway. Ethan stepped forward, faster than she could react. He scooped up the sonogram, fingers tracing the curling edge. His expression changed. Confusion first, then a flash of recognition that made Sarah's breath catch. The sonogram trembled in his hand, his knuckles white. Around them, the hospital buzzed back to life. Someone wheeled a cart past, muttering about lunch deliveries. Sarah snatched the rest of her things, but her eyes never left the sonogram in Ethan's hand. He looked at her, voice low, tense. "Whose baby is that?" She froze. For a moment, every sound in the corridor faded. The footsteps, the beeping monitors, the distant hum of voices. Sarah felt the questions gather around them like a storm. She reached for the printout, but Ethan held it just out of reach. He searched her face for answers, his jaw set. "Sarah, talk to me." Her throat closed up. "It's none of your business." Their standoff drew attention. A nurse glanced up, eyebrows raised. Sarah felt the heat creeping up her neck. She turned away, stuffing her things back into her apron, but Ethan didn't move. He lowered his voice, sharp. "You're avoiding me. You changed your shifts. Why?" Sarah shook her head, words tumbling out. "I can't. This is work, Ethan. Please. A door slammed at the end of the hall. Sarah seized the chance to escape, ducking past Ethan, the sonogram crumpled in her fist. She hurried down the corridor, her pulse roaring in her ears. Behind her, Ethan watched, eyes narrowed, suspicion and something else flickering across his face. In the break room, Sarah collapsed onto a plastic chair. Her hands trembled as she smoothed out the sonogram. The overhead lights flickered. She stared at the image, its blurry shape, the proof of everything she couldn't hide. The PA crackled, announcing a meeting for all staff. Sarah barely heard. Her secret wasn't safe anymore. The storm she'd tried to outrun was here. Ethan stood in the hallway, the sonogram printout still in his hand, the truth beginning to unravel, and Sarah knew there was nowhere left to hide. Have you ever had a secret come out at the worst moment? Comment below, and stay with Sarah as her world turns upside down in the next part. Sarah tried to steady her breath as she ducked into the staff bathroom, the door clicking shut behind her. The overhead light flickered, buzzing like a trapped insect. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal of the stall, clutching the sonogram so hard it wrinkled between her fingers. The confrontation in the hallway looped in her mind. Ethan's voice, sharp and too close, the questions hanging in the air like static. She splashed water on her face, but it did nothing to erase the prickling sense of exposure. In the mirror, she looked less like herself and more like a version from a bad dream, pale, tense, a storm brewing just behind her eyes. The clock above the sink ticked away her resolve. Her phone buzzed again. Staff meeting, admin office, 3:15 p.m. Sarah checked the time. 10 minutes to decide how to face Ethan. And, she suspected, something worse. Her manager's voice barked from the hallway. Sarah, CEO wants to see you in admin, now. Every syllable pressed against her nerves. She followed the path to the admin suite, each step heavier than the last. The hallway walls, glass panels etched with motivational quotes, offered nowhere to hide. Inside, HR waited by the door, expression careful. Ethan stood at the far end of a conference table, arms folded, a closed file in front of him. The room hummed with tension. Sarah tried to keep her chin up as she crossed the threshold, her badge twisting at her chest. Sit down, Sarah. HR's voice was neutral, practiced. Sarah glanced at the phone on speaker between them, the blinking red light a reminder. Everything was being recorded. Ethan didn't sit, just leaned against the window, staring out at the parking lot. His silhouette, sharp in the afternoon glare, looked nothing like the man from that bar, except for the eyes that refused to meet hers. HR cleared her throat. There's a concern regarding workplace professionalism and personal matters interfering with job duties. Sarah blinked, swallowing hard. She didn't trust her voice, so she nodded. Ethan spoke without turning. I just need the truth, Sarah. 3 seconds passed. Sarah counted each one, heartbeat thudding in her ears. She started, words catching in her throat. It was a mistake. One night, I didn't even know your name until I saw your badge. HR scribbled a note. Are you confirming that Mr. Caldwell is the father of your child? The room seemed to shrink. Sarah's hand shook as she gripped the sonogram, desperate to keep something of herself hidden. Yes, she whispered, not trusting herself to say more. A silence settled, broken only by the hum of the HVAC above. Ethan pressed his palm against the glass, watching a couple cross the parking lot far below. Why didn't you come to me? Sarah's eyes flashed. What would I say? Hey, remember me from the bar? Surprise, I'm pregnant and you're my boss? A hint of bitterness cut through her voice. sharper than she meant. HR leaned in. Sarah, your continued employment depends on full transparency. If this goes public, we need to be ready. Ethan turned, his jaw set. No one's firing her over this. For a moment, Sarah saw something softer, guilt, fear, maybe even protectiveness. But then it was gone. HR straightened her papers. We'll review this with legal. For now, both of you are to refrain from discussing personal matters on hospital grounds. Understood? Sarah nodded, though her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She could feel Ethan watching her, but she kept her gaze locked on the pattern of the carpet. She could already hear the stories that would bloom from these 4 glass walls. As she rose to leave, Ethan reached for her wrist, then thought better of it, letting his hand fall. Sarah, he said quietly, I never meant for any of this. She cut him off, her voice shaking but steady. Intentions don't change what's real, Ethan. I have to look out for myself now. She left the admin office, the badge around her neck swinging with each step, her future more uncertain than ever. In the hallway, nurses glanced up as she passed. One whispered, another stared at her belly. Sarah kept moving, pushing through the lobby, her heart thundering in her chest. She slipped into a supply closet, shut the door, and finally let her tears fall, just for a moment, just long enough to breathe. Sarah had confessed everything. The truth was out. But as she leaned against the cold shelf, listening to footsteps gather outside, she knew the worst storm was still ahead. Have you ever been forced to reveal a secret you swore you'd keep? Share your thoughts and join Sarah next time as the fallout begins. Sarah stepped out into the night, the hospital's automatic doors whispering shut behind her. The air had cooled. Neon spilled across wet pavement, painting the world in colors too harsh to be real. She wrapped her arms tight around herself, clutching her purse, her steps echoing in the nearly empty lot. Each breath felt like glass, fragile and sharp, but she kept walking, her gaze fixed ahead. Rumors moved faster than she did. By sunrise, whispers ran through the halls like a contagion. In the staff lounge, conversations stuttered to a stop when she entered. Someone shut a laptop too quickly. The snap made her flinch. She didn't need to see the screens to know her name was spreading. Sarah from the night shift, the CEO's mistake. Her phone pinged with a new alert. A hospital gossip blog had posted an anonymous tip. The headline was merciless. She turned the device face down, but snippets of the post echoed in her mind. Single mom, secret baby, CEO scandal. Frank avoided her in the hallways, his usual gruffness replaced by awkward silence. A few co-workers pretended not to see her. Others watched with thinly disguised curiosity, as if waiting for her to break. On her lunch break, Sarah found herself cornered by 2 nurses near the vending machines. "You okay?" one asked, voice syrupy sweet. The other bit her lip, glancing at Sarah's belly, then away. Sarah just nodded, pretending her hands weren't shaking as she fished out a packet of crackers. The moment the elevator doors slid open, she slipped inside, heart pounding, relief flooding her as the doors hissed shut. She tried to focus on her work, filling charts, restocking supplies, keeping her head down. But the tension followed her, thick and sticky. She caught Ethan's reflection in a window, his expression tight, his phone glued to his ear. He looked older, tired, every line in his suit sharper. They didn't speak. Too much hung between them now. That afternoon, security called her to the front desk. "Tabloids are parked outside again," the guard warned, gesturing to the row of cars with long-lensed cameras. "You want to sneak out the back?" Sarah shook her head. She wasn't running. Not anymore. Still, when she pushed through the side door, a camera flashed, freezing her in place. She covered her face, pushing past the reporters. Questions flew. Is it true? Are you going to sue? Was it all for money? The sidewalk tilted beneath her feet, but she kept moving, refusing to look back. Inside, the staff lounge was quiet, tense. She overheard a group at the table. I'd never want that kind of attention, not for any money. It's not her fault. He's the one in charge. Sarah pressed against the vending machine, letting the clink of falling coins drown out the rest. The sonogram was still tucked in her wallet, the only thing she trusted. After her shift, Ethan found her by the employee entrance. His voice was low, urgent. Let me help you, Sarah. The board's pressuring me to go public, but I can control the story. We can fix this, together. She stepped back, anger flaring up, surprising even herself. I don't want your help. I don't want pity. I'm not a story for you to manage. Ethan's hands dropped to his sides, helpless. I'm just trying, she cut him off. To save your job? Or mine? I'm not your responsibility, Ethan. I can do this on my own. She walked away, refusing to let him see her falter. In the darkness outside, her breath fogged in the cold. She felt every eye on her as she left, every whisper. The city's lights blurred through her tears, but her feet kept moving. At home, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her belly. She felt the small flutter, the promise of new life, and wondered what kind of world she was bringing her child into. She wiped her eyes, opened her laptop, and saw another headline. Don't pity me. I'm not a story. The quote was hers, thrown out in anger, now echoing across gossip sites and message boards. She closed the lid, pressing her hands to her face, letting the silence settle around her. She got up, found her shoes, and stepped out into the quiet street. Alone, she walked toward the park, the night pressing close. She knew the world was watching, waiting for her to break, but she wouldn't. Not now. Sarah moved through the darkness, clutching her secret and her dignity, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. But even as she disappeared into the shadows, the cameras kept flashing, hungry for a story that was never really theirs. What would you do if the whole world was watching your hardest moment? Let us know below, and follow Sarah as she fights for her own future in the next part. Sarah's alarm rang long before the sun rose. For a few seconds, in the silent dark, she almost convinced herself she could stay in bed, let the world move on without her. But there were bills taped to the fridge and a baby coming. Life didn't pause. She sat up, shivering, the air thick with the scent of last night's rain drifting in through a cracked window. The headlines still pinged on her phone, every new message a reminder. The story had outgrown her control. At the hospital, the looks had changed. Where there had been curiosity, now there was calculation. Conversations quieted when she walked into a room. HR summoned her just after clock-in, the request clipped and impersonal. She found herself in a small, fluorescent-lit office, 2 chairs on one side of a cluttered desk, a single one on the other. A union pamphlet sat, forgotten, in a pile of resignation forms. The HR manager, glasses perched on her nose, folded her hands and leaned forward. Sarah, I'm going to be honest. The hospital's image is at stake. There's been pressure from the board, from legal. We're recommending you resign, quietly. No headlines, no lawsuits. Sarah felt the chill in her hands before the anger. You want me to disappear? She said softly. Like I was never here. A pause. We'll provide a severance. Enough for a few months. It's best for everyone. Sarah scanned the room. The ugly carpet, the diploma on the wall, the framed photo of a family at Disney World. She wondered if the woman behind the desk had ever lost a job, ever watched her future get decided in someone else's boardroom. "If I refuse?" Sarah asked, voice tight. The HR manager hesitated. "We have cause to terminate. The press attention is disruptive. But there's another issue, the paternity. If you want medical coverage for your child, we need legal proof. A DNA test. It's the policy." The words landed heavy. Sarah's world shrank to the forms between them, the empty chair at her back. She took a pen, held it above the resignation line, her hand trembling. But she didn't sign. Not yet. The next few days blurred. Sarah spent hours online, searching job listings, scribbling out budgets on napkins, marking deadlines on a free calendar from the pharmacy. The walls of her apartment closed in tighter. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Thinner, eyes ringed with shadow, her stomach already showing. She returned to the hospital one last time to pick up her things. Ethan intercepted her near the staff lounge. He looked exhausted, suit rumpled, tie loose like he'd slept at his desk. He handed her a padded envelope. The DNA test kit, hospital letterhead sharp and final. "I didn't want it this way," he said, voice rough. "But they're pushing. It's the only way you'll get what you need." Sarah searched his face for softness, for regret or hope. Instead, she saw someone fighting a battle on too many fronts. Board members, the media, maybe even his own family. She straightened her shoulders. "You want proof? Fine. But after this, I don't owe you anything." He tried to protest, but Sarah was already walking away, envelope clutched tight. Back home, she sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling as she read the instructions. Swab, seal, sign. She stared at the consent form, her name in block letters above a single blank line. Signing meant she'd be tied to Ethan, publicly, legally, maybe forever. It was the price of her child's future. She signed. A few days later, Sarah returned the envelope, the test done, the choice made. At the hospital, Ethan watched her from across the busy lobby. They didn't speak. The air was thick with something unspoken. Loss, relief, resentment. She caught his gaze, nodded once, and turned away. As she stepped back out into the city, the sun hit her face, dazzling after so many days indoors. She paused at the corner, cars rushing by, horns blaring. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. The job gone, her old life stripped away, the next chapter uncertain and waiting. Sarah had chosen her path. The papers were signed, the tests submitted. But as she walked into the bright unknown, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be simple again. If your whole world depended on one impossible choice, would you sign? Share your thoughts, and don't miss what comes next in Sarah's fight for herself and her baby. The waiting was the hardest part. Sarah counted the hours, then the minutes, living in that uneasy limbo between old life and new. She cleaned her apartment, refolded tiny thrift store baby clothes, checked the mail 3 times a day, every muscle tensed for the next shoe to drop. The hospital was behind her now, but the world kept creeping in. Calls from journalists, emails from distant relatives, half a dozen messages from Ethan that she never answered. Then the letter came. Official, impersonal, stamped in blue. The paternity results. She sat at her kitchen table, the envelope unopened, tea cooling at her elbow. The city outside was loud with summer. Sirens, music from passing cars, someone shouting at a dog. Inside, it was only Sarah and the paper that would decide her future. She tore it open, hands steady, heart anything but. A single paragraph, dense with legal language. Ethan Caldwell was the father. There it was, fact, not rumor, and now it belonged to the whole world. Within hours, her phone buzzed again and again. A reporter wanted a statement. Her cousin called to just check in. An email from HR confirmed that her health insurance would continue for the baby. But what hit hardest was a message from Ethan. "Please, can we talk?" Sarah hesitated, thumb hovering above the screen. She wanted to throw the phone out the window. She wanted to never see his face again. But when she closed her eyes, she pictured the tiny body growing inside her, the one person she couldn't shield from the world. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop on the city's edge, a place where nobody knew her name. She arrived first, ordered water, and sat by the window, watching clouds drift over the skyline. Ethan showed up late, suit jacket draped over his arm, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. He sat, but didn't speak right away. Instead, he traced patterns on the table with his finger, as if searching for the right words in the grain of the wood. Sarah waited. Finally, Ethan looked up. "It's official now," he said, voice low. She nodded. "I want to help," he tried. "Really help. Not just with money, but—" She stopped him with a glance. "Help or fix your reputation." He flinched. "I know how it looks. I know I can't erase what happened, or how we got here. But I can stand by you. I want to. For the baby. For you." For a moment they sat in silence. Outside, a city bus rumbled past, drowning out the pause. Sarah broke the quiet. "I don't want to be anyone's charity case. I'm not looking for rescue, Ethan. I just want to be respected. For you to claim your responsibility and not hide behind PR." Ethan drew a slow breath. "I've been called to a board meeting. It's going public, the test, everything. I want you to know. Whatever happens in that room, I'll speak for us. I'll tell them the truth. No more secrets." Sarah didn't answer. She finished her water, gathered her things, and left him there, staring after her. The board meeting happened that afternoon. She watched a live feed from her phone, heart drumming in her chest. The room was glass and steel, all sharp edges and powerful people, every eye on Ethan. The hospital's reputation was at stake, the story already leaking to the press. She watched Ethan stand before the board, voice strong. "No more secrets. This is my family," he said, echoing the words she'd thrown at him in anger. He took questions. He stood by her name, by the baby. The room exploded. Some angry, some surprised, some respectful. Cameras flashed. News sites ran with the quote. Outside, Sarah's apartment building buzzed with reporters, phones ringing off the hook. Her neighbors peered through their blinds, their curiosity bolder than their sympathy. Still, for the first time, Sarah felt the anger drain away. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was something like hope. She met Ethan in the hospital lobby, the two of them surrounded by a sea of cameras and questions. This time, she didn't look away. She didn't let go of his hand when he offered it, the two of them standing, together, under the glare of lights, unhidden, unashamed, the truth exposed for everyone to see. Reporters surged forward, questions flying, but Sarah stood her ground beside Ethan. In that chaos, she understood. Her secret was no longer a weapon. It was her story, and this was just the beginning. "Would you claim your truth no matter the cost?" Comment below and see what happens when the spotlight fades. But the fight for family continues in the next chapter. The city's glare faded as summer waned, but the glare of public attention never did. In the days after Ethan's boardroom confession, Sarah felt exposed in new ways. A different kind of nakedness, one you couldn't cover with clothes or locked doors. People stared on the sidewalk, sometimes whispering her name as she passed. Old friends fell silent. Others reached out with awkward support. A letter from her landlord arrived, heavy with implication about unwanted media on the premises. Ethan lost his annual bonus, the hospital's board making an example of him. Sarah, jobless and blacklisted by local clinics, counted every dollar twice before spending it. Their new routine was survival. Ethan brought takeout to her apartment, setting cartons of cheap noodles on the kitchen table. He no longer wore a tie, sometimes showed up unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm staying on as CEO," he told her once, hands shaking around his coffee. "But the boards put me on review. No more secrets," they said. Sarah only nodded, cradling her belly, too tired to offer comfort or blame. Some nights they ate in silence, the television flickering over news stories about other people's scandals. "Family isn't just blood. It's choice," Ethan said one evening, voice soft as rain. Sarah didn't reply, but she didn't send him away. Then came the worst night, the one that changed everything. Sarah woke to pain, a squeezing, suffocating pressure that ripped her from sleep. She gasped, trying to stand, the apartment spinning. Her phone fell to the floor. She called Ethan with shaking hands. The cab ride to the hospital was a blur, Ethan's arm steadying her, lights smearing past the window, the city impossibly far from the small world of her breath and pain. Inside, everything moved too quickly. Nurses shouting, doctors guiding her to a bed, the air sharp with disinfectant and fear. Sarah clung to Ethan's hand, her grip iron strong. The baby came too soon, the cries thin and bird-like, swallowed by the whir of NICU machines. For days, time lost meaning. Sarah slept in a vinyl chair beside the incubator, body hollowed out by exhaustion and worry. Ethan hovered close, feeding quarters into the waiting room coffee machine, his shirt stained, his voice raw from pleading with insurance reps. Together, they stared at the tiny figure in the glowing box, tubes, sensors, life measured in heartbeats and numbers on a screen. The hospital bills piled up in fat envelopes. Sarah tried not to look at the totals. Ethan quietly covered the ones marked urgent, but even he winced at the zeros. Some days, all they could afford for dinner was soggy fries from the cafeteria. Sarah clung to the hope that their child would be strong, would make it through the storm. One night, as rain battered the hospital windows, Sarah found herself gripping Ethan's hand beneath the harsh lights of the NICU. The nurses whispered encouragement, but the future felt fragile. "You can go home, Ethan," Sarah whispered. "You don't have to stay for this." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not leaving. Not for this. Not for anything." Sarah didn't answer, just watched the tiny rise and fall of their baby's chest, her other hand pressed to the plastic. For the first time, she believed they might survive, not because things got easier, but because they'd stopped running. Days blurred. Nurses posted updates on the whiteboard, drawing tiny hearts beside good numbers. Sarah learned every beep and whir of the machines, found comfort in small routines, reading aloud from the free library, tracing her baby's name on the steamed glass. Ethan showed up every morning, even when meetings waited. Sometimes he fell asleep in the chair, neck bent awkwardly, never quite at rest. One afternoon, as sunlight cut through rain clouds, Sarah looked around the cramped waiting room. Empty coffee cups, a pile of bills, a cheap takeout box balanced on Ethan's knee. She thought of everything they'd lost: privacy, money, certainty. But as she looked through the glass at their fragile, fierce little family, she realized what they'd found. Sarah squeezed Ethan's hand, both of them watching their baby fight for life under the soft glow of NICU lights. In that stillness, the cost was clear, but so was the choice. They would face whatever came next together. Have you ever found strength in your darkest hour? Tell us your story below, and stay with Sarah as she builds a new life, one small victory at a time. The world outside their window spun on, but inside Sarah's new apartment, time moved gently, sometimes in circles. The building was old, paint peeling from the banister, pipes clanging on cold mornings. Still, it was theirs. A single bedroom, a tiny kitchen with a fridge barely big enough for leftovers and formula. Sarah hung baby clothes to dry over the radiator, the room filling with the scent of soap and sunlight. Their daughter came home from the hospital in a blanket 3 sizes too big, her fists curled against the world. Sarah studied her for hours, memorizing every line in her face, every shudder of breath. The doctor warned them about setbacks. There would be appointments, sleepless nights, emergencies always lurking. But at home, the rhythm was quieter. Bottles sterilized in the sink, fridge magnets spelling out hopeful words, Ethan's jacket always thrown over the same chair. They made a family from small things. Ethan brought home groceries, sometimes from discount bins, sometimes just whatever he could carry on the subway. He tried, fumbling the first time he changed a diaper, clumsy with baby lotion, but determined not to fail. Sarah caught him singing softly to their daughter at night, voice rough from exhaustion, but steady. Most days, the world's judgment hovered at their doorstep. Ethan's family sent terse emails. "We hope you know what you're doing." Sarah's old friends drifted further away, unsure how to fit in her new life. At the grocery store, strangers sometimes stared a second too long at Ethan, then at her. In the mail came government vouchers for baby food, addressed only to parent guardian. Sarah clipped them carefully to the fridge with a red magnet. Still, there were quiet joys. Watching sunlight slip through worn curtains, tracing tiny hands across her daughter's cheeks. The unexpected gift of laughter when Ethan accidentally spilled formula and tried to clean it up with one of Sarah's old t-shirts. They learned to be a team in the simplest ways. Grocery lists scribbled on receipts, laundry folded together at the laundromat, budgeting every dollar but never running out of stories to share. Sometimes, after dinner, Sarah would sit by the window, her daughter sleeping on her chest, and listen to the distant city. A lullaby of car horns, wind through leaves, the soft tick of the kitchen clock. One morning, Sarah found her daughter standing, hands braced against the couch, unsteady but determined. Ethan crouched beside her, camera ready, face shining with pride. "First steps," he whispered, voice trembling. The room erupted in laughter and applause, both of them cheering as their daughter stumbled into Ethan's arms. There were hard days, too. Ethan's name in the news again after another board decision, hospital paychecks running thin, the judgmental glance from a neighbor, the quiet resentment in the elevator. But each time, Sarah found herself a little less shaken, a little more sure of her place. Love, she realized, wasn't a promise shouted for the world. It was showing up, every day, in the smallest of ways. Breakfast became a ritual. The three of them squeezed around the wobbly table, sunlight pooling across faded linoleum. Ethan read the headlines aloud, sometimes good, often not, while Sarah poured coffee, her daughter waving a spoon like a magic wand. The fridge was covered in magnets, bills, appointment cards, a single Polaroid of the three of them together. Tired, smiling, stubbornly whole. One day, Ethan lingered by the window, his eyes distant. "We can do this, you know," he said softly. "All of it, no matter what anyone thinks." Sarah took his hand, squeezed it gently. "We already are." The apartment filled with the sound of their daughter's giggles, a bright ribbon of hope that wound through the clutter, the doubt, the lingering shadows. Their family wasn't perfect, never would be. But they were there day after day, choosing each other through every hardship, every tiny triumph. Sarah glanced at the sunlight cutting through the curtains, and for the first time in a long while, she believed the future could be bright, not in spite of their struggles, but because of them. As breakfast ended and their daughter reached for another bite, Sarah looked around the room, Ethan's hand in hers, sunlight on the table, her daughter's first smile of the morning, and knew this was enough. Love meant showing up, every day. What does showing up mean to you? Tell us below, and don't miss how Sarah shares her story with the world in the final chapter. Sarah had never thought of herself as brave. Most days, courage was simply getting out of bed, feeding her daughter, counting change at the corner store. But after months of struggle with the worst storms behind them, she found herself craving something more, a way to make sense of everything, to turn hardship into something she could hold and share. On a quiet evening, after the dinner dishes had been stacked to dry, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open. Ethan cradled their daughter, gently bouncing her to sleep in the next room. The apartment glowed in the soft light of a single lamp, shadows stretching long and calm across the floor. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant at first. She reread the words she'd drafted and deleted a dozen times. Her story, in her own voice. The loneliness, the fear, the moments when she almost gave up. The way a single night can change everything, and how family is sometimes a choice you make over and over, even when the world is watching. She stared at the blank post button, the cursor blinking. Her heart raced with the old, familiar anxiety. But she thought of her daughter, sleeping just a few feet away, of Ethan's unwavering presence, of all the women she'd met in waiting rooms and online forums, each carrying secret battles behind tired smiles. The decision became clear. Sarah posted her journey in a private Facebook group for single moms. She wrote of shame, but also of hope, of public judgment, but also quiet strength. Photos followed. Her daughter's tiny fingers curled around her own, Ethan holding their child in the hospital, family selfies in front of the little apartment window. She ended with a line she'd repeated to herself through every dark hour. "Your story isn't over. It's yours to write." The response was instant. Comments, messages, hearts, and hugs from strangers who recognized themselves in her words. Women wrote of their own struggles, fights for respect, for safety, for dignity. "You made me feel less alone," someone wrote. Another posted, "Thank you for saying it out loud, for not pretending it's easy." The thread grew, post after post. Photos of newborns, crowded apartments, makeshift birthday cakes. A network of survivors, mothers and daughters, each giving a little more courage to the next. Ethan saw the post on Sarah's screen, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and smiled softly. You're helping more than you know, he whispered. Sarah shook her head, a smile curling despite herself. We're helping. All of us. Soon, her story began to spread, shared in other groups, commented on by mothers across the city. She started getting invitations to speak at local support meetings, to join community calls. Sometimes she simply listened. Other times, she spoke quietly, telling them about small victories and hard nights. She learned to celebrate not just survival, but the power of honest connection. One weekend, Sarah took a family selfie on her old cell phone. She posted it with the hashtag #MyFamilyMyWay, a flag for every unconventional household finding its place. We're messy and loud and sometimes scared, she wrote in the caption. But we're here and we're together. There were still challenges. The world didn't forget scandal easily. Some days, Sarah would see old headlines or hear a stranger mutter her name on the subway. Bills still came. Money was always tight, and there were moments she doubted everything. But she held fast to the idea that their family, no matter how fragile, was worth fighting for. On the wall above the kitchen table, Sarah pinned a collage of photos. Her daughter's first steps, Ethan's laugh caught mid-sentence, sunrise over their little street. Below it, she taped a piece of paper, written in her own looping handwriting. Have you ever stood up for your family against the odds? Share your story in the comments. For more real-life journeys like this, subscribe to our channel. The story was no longer just Sarah's. It belonged to every mother who read it, every child who saw their parents' courage reflected back. In her daughter's eyes, she saw the future, not perfect, but fiercely her own. The lamplight flickered, painting golden shapes across the family's faces as they leaned in for another photo, another memory, another ordinary, extraordinary day. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside their small home, a new story was just beginning, written with hope, hardship, and the choice to never give up.